Hi, everyone. How are you? I am Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace, and welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. We are speaking on cults this week, so it's going to be a really interesting show, hopefully. Always is, right? If you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, like, subscribe, join, all of that good stuff. I appreciate your support. If you would like to become a sponsor of the show because you'd like to support it, you can go to sherrypalace.com and the support tab is right there. I want to thank our current supporters. We've got Ruth, Amanda, Michelle, Kirsten. You guys rock, you ladies, that is. And they keep us going. But just you watching is supporting. So I appreciate that. And thank you for doing so. Please keep all the comments and questions related to the topic of the show. And remember that this is a safe space. If you enjoy the show, I would love to have you in the VIP afterwards, and joining sherrypalace.com does that. When you comment, if you log into StreamYard, I can see your name. If you don't, you'll be anonymous. And that's up to you. Okay, so let me bring on tonight's panel because we've got a lot to talk about. The first one is, let's see here. How do I want to do this? There we go. Oh, let's do it this way. Steve Slocum was 17, unhappy and confused when he fell into an extreme Christian group on the University of Arizona campus. His commitment grew so extreme that he took his family to Kazakhstan as missionaries. There, the cult leader severely abused and traumatized his family. He left the Christian faith and now focuses on uniting people from diverse cultures. He authored the award-winning book, Why Do They Hate Us? Making Peace with the Muslim World, and founded the nonprofit SalamUSA.org. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, welcome.
Thank
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for being here. Next, we have Tim. And if you've been watching the show, Tim is usually in our VIP afterwards. And he is actually the reason why I started the show. Well, he prodded me to do so. Anyway, let me introduce him. Tim Hammett earned his divinity degree and served in the Presbyterian Ministry for over 20 years. He retired in 2001. In 2019, he retired from the Iowa National Guard, working for the Department of Public Defense. In the early 70s, Tim was drawn to groups who were critical of civil and ecclesiastical systems. However, he saw the same power dynamics across them all, leading him to embody the Who's lyrics, "We won't get fooled again." Now at 67, he's returned to his first love, music, playing drums professionally since the age of 11. Welcome, Tim.
Good evening.
I'm so glad to have you on this side of the panel.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh?
You get to see the back workings of everything. Thanks for being here. Next, we have Brady. Brady is a secular humanist who co-hosts a Life After podcast after experiencing spiritual abuse. He grew up in an unstable Southern Baptist household, which inadvertently pushed him into commit harder to the church. He committed his future expressing his homosexuality and to the full-time ministry. During a time of great loss and spiritual abuse, he left the faith and finally gave freedom to his sexuality. Years into his deconstruction, he created the Life podcast and community to help others identify spiritual abuse, trust professional therapy, and heal from religious trauma. Hi, Brady. Thank you for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Love to see all you guys. So before I close down my screen share, I want to bring something up, which is the general signs of the cult, right?
Yes.
And there are some key things to look at when we are discussing a cult. And of course, the top one is going to be opposes critical thinking. Emphasizes special knowledge and blessings, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control, inappropriate devotion to the leaders, separation and condemnation for anyone outside of their beliefs, paranoia and victim mentality, money, 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 money. Sorry, focus on death. I've been singing this all day. Focus on death, either succumbing to and or initiating it. So let's start from there and
Mm.
see how each of you have been affected by this. Steve, you're up top. We'll start with you.
Okay, well, I think I've experienced like those are like divided up into two different areas. One is more the narcissist, really strong leader who
Mm.
abuses his power, and the other side is this whole special teaching, special awareness side. So when I first got into Christianity, I got in through a group known as the Plymouth Brethren. I don't know, they're a very obscure little group, but their main focus was, there's us, and then there's the churches. And
Mhm.
we really get it. We practice Christianity properly, and no one else does. And a couple things that they did that made them think they did that was that they didn't have a pastor per se. They only had elders, um, which they're trying to be. They call themselves New Testament church. Trying to be just totally pure to New Testament teaching. And then the other thing they do is they really highlight, call it the Lord's Supper, the breaking of the bread, and they have a special meeting every week that only talks about breaking of the bread. So that got me into this whole mentality that I'm in this group, that really gets it right. And aren't I lucky? Because I'm in this one group, and we're the
Special
only
knowledge
ones
and
that have it
blessings.
right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I really fell into that. And then later, when I ended up, as a missionary, ended up serving under a narcissist, and of course, they take advantage of, they sense. He wasn't smart enough to articulate any of this, but he just had it deep inside of him that he would sense anyone who had experienced trauma or something, and would just latch on to that part that had been traumatized, and then feed into that, and then get you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. And this guy had a group of 50 people who I considered normal people. Um, and all of them were missionaries, right? So confused that none of us knew what was right and what was wrong. And I'm not exaggerating about that. There were things going on there that were, just horrible treatment of people that were being, explained and as if, validated, and everyone would go along with it. That's
Yeah.
how good this guy was at doing that
I
stuff.
think I
So
should
that's
have
kind of
added
my experience.
exploitation to my list. The
Mm,
exploitation of pain, right?
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point. Hmm.
Mm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
So that's no, that's my that's it. Those two areas were kind of my experience.
Brady.
So my interaction with cults is twofold. First, I grew up in a very Southern Baptist church that was very evangelical, and then I ended up at a very exclusive Reformed Calvinistic the Southern Baptist Church in the suburbs of St. Louis, and it operates as a cult. And I was thinking about Dr. Stephen Hassan, who's a cult expert, and
Mm-hmm.
he has that what he calls the BITE model, and that
Yes.
stands for behavior, information, thought, and an emotional control. And I think that's what you were touching on.
That's
Your
actually where I stole that from
oh,
in
nice,
part of my
beautiful.
list. It was, I didn't do the acronym, but it is on
Mhm.
there because it is such a powerful, it's control. It's the exploitation and all of that.
Very much so. And so
Mm,
the last church that I came in that I was disfellowshipped from was insane. Like before I was leaving, they were controlling how much time I saw my infant son. When I tried to visit another church, they contacted them to warn them about me. I was disfellowshipped. It was insane, and so that control was there. So that was step one for me, and step two was as I was deconstructing, I just started to watch a. Can I cuss here?
Yes.
shit ton of cult documentaries. And what that did for me was it showed me where deconstruction intersects with understanding how cults work. And so then it kind of gave me an idea of a pattern to look for of how when a story is so incredible that it can't stand on its own legs, it depends on these other emotional things for it to be able to survive. And so I was able to start seeing the same tactics and methods in these documentaries like Holy Hell or Sons of Perdition, Sons of God, The Family, Leah Remini's Jesus Camp, which was filmed like just a few hours from where I live, and all of that. So I was and also reading Leah Remini's book, Troublemaker. I have it really near me. I almost like pulled it like a reading Rainbow to don't take my word for it. But her book was incredible. And I remember just walking in the park and thinking, you know, the stories that tricked her seem outrageous, but so do mine. And it was the tactics that made us fall for it in common. And so those were kind of my two interests with cults, was understanding that I came from I would call a high pressure religious community, whether that fits the cult thing perfectly or not doesn't matter to me personally. And then the second one is educating myself with the patterns of cults and using those into my deconstruction to know what information to trust and what information to question and how.
I was 10 years old when my mother gave me the book, The Kingdom of the Cults. And for a 10-year-old, that was pure indoctrination, let's just say that. But it was done through a Christian lens and labeled everything else a cult. So I spent most of my life assuming that everything else was a cult. And then in my own deconstruction and working for this chat, someone had said to me, well, you know, what is your definition of a cult? And I came from, in my opinion, anything that divides people is cultish. And so when my mother was forced to get rid of me because I was living in sin or disown her friends, you know, those are cults too. And when I was asked by someone in the Facebook Fireside group, well, what do you mean by cults? I started doing this like checklist, and I'm like, okay, well, that covers most of mainstream religion at this point.
Right.
You know,
right.
and because people think that it's mainstream, they say, well, then it can't be a cult. But if it's still doing these things, if it's still creating chaos and victimhood and give me your money and all of those things that come across, it doesn't matter if there's 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, or 30. It can still be a cult in cult think.
That's a great point. I remember on my podcast, The Life After, we had a cult expert on there, Dr. Alan Rick Ross, which was amazing. And he's kind of like a hero of mine. He worked for a video game that was about cults that I loved, and he was like their consultant. So getting to interview him I was nerding out. But I remember that a lot of our questions and the questions we got afterwards were about how he would talk about the financial side of a cult and when it comes to defining it. Because our churches, Southern Baptist churches, etc., they have a different model, and we live in a different world now where we have online things. We have, people that can just like market themselves online, or they can have like a really niche group. And so when it comes to the financial side of it, I don't know if that's going to be the most helpful definer for us going forward. I think you have a better idea of when we're talking about influence and harm. I think that should be kind of how we define it, the center of the conversation of how we define it. It's not the financial capitalistic side, not at all, saying that's Dr. Rick Ross, but that aspect is usually there. but the influence and stuff, we need to redefine that for ourselves. Because if I could watch these movies about extreme examples, like in Holy Hell, the documentary, if I could watch that and relate to it, then is that experience that's being represented, and it is defining our human experience together.
Tim, what do you have to say?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that the etymology, the development of the use and association of the word cult has changed quite a bit in the last 50 or 60 years. The word cult shares the same root as culture. So that we don't see the word culture as something that's wrong necessarily, but it quickly identifies people who had shared beliefs or forms of literature, art, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the 20th century, especially probably in the late 60s, early 70s, cults were basically defined those who would deviate from what would be considered Christian orthodoxy. But that didn't work, because what happened is you had groups that would still adhere, at least on paper, to Christian orthodoxy, but something was seriously wrong. And that is that it would become a complete and total control of the people and the way they thought, making decisions for them in regards to their life. Their culture had to be completely conformed to the charismatic leader. So that had to shift and it had to change a bit. In regards to my own experience is a bit different, because the cult that originally started where I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, did not start out as a cult. It started out as a street ministry that had all the earmarks of Jesus movement type things, that was somewhat within the realm of Christian orthodoxy, but had a very charismatic and very handsome leader. But he was known. He was known. I mean, his dad was my dad's Boy Scout leader back in the 30s. He went to the local high school. In the early 60s, he went out to San Francisco, and he went through a change, came back, and instantly had a connection with street kids. I had just been out of high school for about 4 or 5 months, and they started what was called the Lighthouse, where he and his wife literally lived in a small house in a bedroom community attached to Chattanooga, but the place was packed. And as you know, I was in music, and there was a bass player that said, you need to go hear this guy. So I went, and nothing really impressed me that much. But through a series of personal experiences, I was really very much reconciled to my parents, because I had given my parents quite a bit of grief by the time I was 18 years old. I was playing in clubs, this, that, and the other. Being brought up in the Southern Baptist Church, at least they claim on paper they don't dance. And so here I was playing in clubs and underage. So I liked what I saw, and I kept returning, but quickly I saw somewhat, and I call this an eclectic tension, and that is between the institutions, such as the large Southern Baptist Church that I attended, and it was a very well-known Southern Baptist church that had very strong preachers down through the years from the Second World War up. This was not a small backwater Southern Baptist church. At the same time, I lived with, performed with Afro-American musicians, and I knew that there was not just latent but overt racism in the church that I attended. And so here was the institution that I was beginning to say, these guys are abusing power. So I go to this street ministry, and it sounds like they're saying the right things, but within a year and a half, it was like the Who. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. They're doing the same power struggles. So by the time I was 18 years old, in so many words and in love, I told him to go F himself. And so this was a strong leader. This is not a small cult.
Fuck you, bless your heart.
Yeah, they developed from a small street ministry meeting in a small house. There are over 3,000 strong now in every major continent of globally. Wow. They're huge. They're called the 12 tribes. Look them up, and they're still going strong. The leader just died within like 8 months. And I know he went by this strange new biblical name, but I know him as Gene Spriggs. I mean, Gene was Gene. He put on his pants the same way I did. I'm always a look behind the kind of curtain guy. And so it all goes back down to the very thing that you had on your top list, the critical thinking. My mother always said to me, you know, Tim, you sit down on the outside, but you're standing up on the inside. And I've always been like that. Somebody had better allow me to think clearly and thoughtfully and critically, or they're out the door. They're out the door. And so my whole life has been this, what appears to be a contradiction of working within the institution, but also flirting, if I may say, with the revolution. I don't believe in burning down institutions. That's what's getting us in trouble today in the 21st century, is that we want to burn down the institutions. And in the 60s, I was approached by the Weathermen to be a part of that, burning things down, but I knew that there were redeemable, if not things that should be salvaged within our institutions. And so I'm always listening to the revolutionaries, but also working eclectically within the institution. That's why I went to seminary. And that's why I'm not a part. I haven't attended a church in 5-6 years. So, you know.
Well, Jesus was a revolutionary.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
yes,
and I don't think that he was trying, I mean, it might have been a cult back then, but, you know, when you look at the top of this list and the bottom of this list,
yes,
we see these things across the spectrum, even today.
Right.
We have people who are like snake wranglers, right? That are saying,
right.
Well, God will protect me from getting bitten, or God will protect me from COVID. You know, totally not even
Right.
thinking and coming to this, well, you know, if God wants me to die, I just will. That's a death cult.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm always saying across social media, cults usually end in death, but there is a middle ground where there's still a ton of trauma that can occur and
Yes.
it not be in death. I mean,
correct.
My mom disowned me. She, you know, cast everybody aside. So no one technically died.
Right.
But I was crushed, you know, my soul was crushed. There was serious trauma that was involved in this. So I think that, you know, the top three things are, you know, abandon critical thinking, abandon anybody else who disagrees with your belief, and then the succumb to death, you know, or initiate. We have Jim Jones, we have Waco, we have, you know, it goes all, I mean, hundreds of years worth of people saying, you know, I'm going to die. Haley bought, what was that one where they put on the tennis shoes and the track suits? And I mean, we have those extremes, but we also have the minor things where it still causes trauma and fucks up your head, but
right.
you know, is still a cult, even though it doesn't have you know, a death spiral or anything else involved.
And let me also add, if I may, I think cults are in some respects the unpaid bills of the institutional church. And let me give an example of this. When this cult that I just referred to was developing in Chattanooga, I mean, it started out as called the Lighthouse. I mean, it was just a bunch of kids, really, that were my age that wore bell bottoms and paisley shirts, and we had hair down to our shoulders. Okay, and First Presbyterian Church which is a historic Presbyterian church in Chattanooga, started welcoming us, but wanted us to be a part of the institutional church. But what we found out quickly was those that we brought in were of a different social class and also mixed.
Yes.
And the way they treated us was like the alarms went off. Well, the cult leader reacted to that and eventually became what it is today. So that's the unpaid bills. See, there's the guilt of the institutional church doing this and causing this to happen. And so, you know, but oddly enough, if you go back and read the 12 tribes' views now, they have more overt racism in their own creed. They actually believe in slavery. Can you believe that they've gone from that to what was originally their repulsion 40 some odd years ago?
Right.
But that's what happened. So I do believe it's the unpaid bills of the institutional church.
Well, and I think they all ask for some form of sacrifice too,
Yes.
right? I mean, Steve, your sacrifice was bringing your family over to Kazakhstan. In my case, it was, my mother was sacrificing her daughter, for her beliefs. It goes all the way back to, the Old Testament there's no bigger killer than Jesus or than God, right? He kills
Right,
Passover, kills all these things. So we're kind of conditioned already to say, well, that's okay. It's okay because that's what happened before. So it's to deprogram yourself to accept those types of things and to accept those sacrifices. Because let's just say, Jesus died on the cross for us. He didn't ask us to die for him. And when that gets convoluted to say, okay, well, now you need to sacrifice your whole life, I think that's a huge warning sign for a cult. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And my
and
religious
they not only do they
go ahead, please.
Go
ahead,
no,
Steve.
go ahead.
Yes.
Oh,
Steve, go.
What I
Yes,
was going to
Steve.
say was that, thank you. What I was going to say was that not only do they teach this, but in my case, and I think they do this a lot, is they very much reward you. They reward you. There's this feedback. They give you a prize. They put you up on stage. They write about you. They tell everyone about you. They make announcements about you, and people that are needy for approval or things like that. It's like giving them crack. That's what it was for me. This reward, that just took me. There was no commitment that I wouldn't make. There was no sacrifice that I wouldn't make to get some more of that.
Well, and in your bio, you talked about how you were needy and scared. And I think that's when the cult grabs you, right? You see drug addicts walking into church because they need this. And a lot of people say, oh, you can't get clean without God. But when you are getting that fill, when you are getting that nourishment, when you've lacked it for so long, you fall in love. And we all know what happens with that.
That's huge.
Yeah, and it's always the single person. It's always some. Sorry, Bree. It's
loner.
I was alone. I went alone, and man, they just latch onto you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was, like I said in my bio, which was the one that I wrote for the previous episode, but fits into here. The reason that I fell into the church so much is because my home life was shitty and my relationship with my dad was shitty, and I'm gay, and it's not because my home life is shitty. I'm gay because I'm gay and that's who I am. But like they would always do the whole like, oh, you have an overbearing mother or a bad relationship with a father, so no one, and it was like this thing of like trying to normalize or blame it, but it's also like shaming me for having a bad home life. And it's like, no, fuck that. Like now today I'm able to see that because like I'm because in my generation, like we are the seeker generation, and we are just like, we want to be like, see me, feel me. We're just like, we want to know the real me, right? And we won't be fooled again. And it's like that's our thing. And so when it comes to knowing who we are, I stop blaming myself now, because that belief system, that the framework that a cult is on there is taken down. And now it's just, it's me and I'm able to be my own individual. I think a lot of times the cults are very prescriptive. They're saying this is who you should be. But now I've switched and say, no, humanity is descriptive. And that is, oh, these people are trans. Well, then these people are trans, period. Then it's a studying thing, right? It's us observing how humanity is instead of dictating what humanity should be. And when there's a lot of shoulds, be throwing around.
It's so
And
subjective.
it's right. But when those shoulds become objective inside of a community, your red flags need to be flying of not, oh, can we really define this as a cult, but oh God, there's cult behavior happening here. What can I do to protect myself and protect the people that I love who are also here alongside me? Also, Tim, I purposely hid, I think, 5 Who songs into that. So
Yes, you did. I noticed.
Love it. You get the award, Brady. I caught like 2. Tim, what were you going to say?
Well, it's just like in a relationship. Have you noticed that two people, when they get into a relationship, so often they're just really over the moon with each other. Then, if it's an abusive relationship, then all of a sudden, person A wants to change person B, and most of us were brought up in Baptistic evangelical backgrounds, and you remember the old hymn, "Just as I am, without one plea." But see, after you make the decision, it's not just as I am; it's just as I am, and I want you to conform to this. And one of the things that really tripped me was this: I was always the black sheep of my family, and in my religious conversion, the first thing that came to me and that really bothered me was my broken relationship with my parents. Not what they had done to me, what I had done to them. And I remember I beelined over there, and my dad was sitting in his lazy boy that I just got rid of here within the last year, by the way. I've kept it since he passed in 2000. It looked horrible, but I just couldn't let it go. And my mother was sitting over there beside him on the couch. I spent the hour, I can't remember what I was saying, but crying and I'm sorry and this, that, and the other. This cult eventually, within the year, wanted you to leave your parents. And I thought, no, wait, my religious conversion included my parents, part of reconciliation and healing. And here they were telling me that no, they're part of the system and you need to get rid of it. And that's when I got in my car and went down in front of an entire group of people, told him where to put it. And that was it. And also, the black singer of our group was with me as well. And he and I worked together talking to people and saying, you need to watch out for this bunch. They're up to no good. And in the last year, I think I showed you the Facebook string that was on my Facebook page that this came up again, and the people that after over 40 years were coming on board and saying, and again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but it was me and Greg Richardson and thanking us for, as kids, to make us stop and think, what are you doing?
Yes,
before
so important.
Yeah, and my skepticism has never been an enemy to me. It is a friend to me to this day. Who, what, when, where, and how, and why? Why should I do this? And unless my own conscience is satisfied, I'm not going to go with it. Period.
But when you believe in talking snakes, you kind of release that critical thinking, right? I mean, when you're conditioned,
you can.
And let me say for anybody watching, Tim is not an angel, although he may look like it at this point.
I was going to mention that. I was going to say,
I'm an angel sent from the Lord.
A new group. I'm sending my email address when I'm done. It'll only cost you $5 to join.
I'm like, when did Touched by an Angel reboot?
Exactly.
I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that came from. But it's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, I mean, anything that divides, anything that says that you are worse than me, anything that works in the ego is eventually going to be chaotic and destructive, whether that be for yourself, whether that be for someone else, whether that be for your family. Yes. I mean, anytime you say it's us versus them,
exactly.
that's when something starts. And ironically, I believe that was the antithesis of what religion was started to do. You know, religion was started to join us together, to love your neighbor, to teach us these things. So when it is counterintuitive to that, when it says we are better, they are lesser, we are going to heaven, they're going to hell, mass murder everywhere, that's a cult. If it's not making you a better person, meaning more loving, then it's destructive, and that's gonna be a cult.
I like that point.
But they latch on to.
One second, Steve. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Brady. Your turn.
Thank you. I think about that qualifier a lot that you're mentioning of when did that transition occur? Yeah. And I look at it historically, and I have to realize that there's a huge difference in how information is moved between. I mean, where are you, Sherry? You're east coast?
Florida.
Florida. Steve, where are you?
He's in
California. I'm in San Diego.
San Diego, and Tim, where are you?
Midwest.
Midwest. Same with me. So I'm in St. Louis. So the point is that, like, because of the internet, we're able to finally have all of these conversations so quickly and understand all these things that we would look at as colloquial or local cultures. And so when it came to religion, that's what happened. But then as the world became smaller, because technology became bigger and was able to and travel, and then we were able to kind of not just have conversations with other Christians, but we'd have conversations with people who are Jewish. We had conversations with Muslims. We had conversations with more atheists, and those conversations is the new information that we're able to kind of add into our libraries and into how we interpret how the world is going. So, to me, because we have all this other information together, I can look at Christianity, which makes these very supernatural claims of, the people that are Christian will be unified by this one spirit. Their beliefs will be similar. They're going to have this socialist like utopia, selling their clothes, selling everything to give to each other and to the poor and all this. But then now that I have all of that, I can compare it to other claims that are similar. I could see, those really worked where they were. And it came with these claims of exclusivity that were probably helpful back then. But now in this context where we have a better understanding of the world, Jesus saying that he's the only way can go fuck the way off, right? And we can see that, like,
there's no one of anything in this world.
He probably was a cult leader, but the way they wrote him was helpful. So, like, so it's just like a different understanding in the context of the information that we have available. And then it's even in the Bible, right? The whole, oh man, kids these days. I think it's in Exodus. There's like a passage that complains about this generation compared to that. So there's like a generational pride that happens too, of like, well, this new generation has more information than us. They're coming at things in a different way. Fuck that shit. We're going to have tribalism by age now, or tribalism by generation, and try to push against that. But then we've got people like you all who are either in the same age range or a little bit like more legacy than I am.
Watch it,
legacy. Legacy, all right. Legacy revolutionaries, like you all who break those stereotypes and show no, this movement of like humanity being the focus is fucking generational, and it's time for us to kind of break these other demographic things.
Well, this is actually why I curse. Well, I curse because I curse. I'm not going to try and blame anything, but why I allow cursing on this show, and why I will constantly fight back if someone tries to judge me on cursing, because cursing makes God a snob. And that you don't get any more cliquish than that when etiquette and manners are directly attributed to your salvation. That's a cult. Jesus called the Pharisees vipers. That was definitely cursing back then. And in 500 years from now, cat might be the F word. We don't know, but we know fuck wasn't a word 600 years ago. So,
Yeah.
I get messages all the time in my private messages, Sherry, why do you curse? And it's don't even, because it is a click at that point. You are monitoring somebody's manners and etiquette as opposed to morals and ethics.
You will never guess who taught me something similar to that.
Who? What?
Dr. John Piper. I was one of those assholes, but there were like two things that he taught that really helped me in my deconstruction. One was, if you're listening to somebody who's angry and hurt and speaking from a place of like emotional vulnerability and they curse, do not correct them, because what's most important is listening to them. John Piper somehow taught me that.
Is right twice a day.
And the other one had something to do with my deconstruction too, and if I think of it later, I'll let you know. But yeah, two weird things that came from John Piper that like resonated into my deconstruction. Anyway, go ahead, you've got the floor.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut, and the broken clock is worth, right twice a day. Steve, I was just going to call on you. Where did you go? Okay. Steve, are you there?
I think I said John Piper and he left.
He was like, I'm out. Tim, what do you have to say?
Well, I have to reiterate what Brady just said. It's extremely important, because systemic racism is as old as the founding of this country.
Yes.
And if we don't see that as
obscene, mankind, actually.
But if we don't see that as obscene, but we trip over the word fuck, that right there is the epitome of hypocrisy. When someone wants to latch on to the F word, but cannot face and discuss with in depth in seeking a resolution regarding system racism, that shows you the entire system is messed up. And let me bring that into a larger thing here. We've been discussing cults as if they are some isolated thing. And I want to be very careful how I tread on this. Early on, when the pandemic broke out, there was a panel, and I need to go back and look at my notes back in March of 2020, that discussed the ongoing problem of an epistemological crisis. And that is that our country, on a baseline, has not been able to process information into a workable system any longer. In other words, there's this cognitive dissonance. There's a divorce from facts and reality. And we're still living with that regardless of the data and information that's right before us. And this is why we all struggle with the idea of the snooty doctor that misdiagnosed, makes too much money. Same thing with attorneys, same thing with politicians. But we don't go after their systems and institutions as if we want to burn them down to the ground, as if they have nothing to say to us whatsoever. And so I would suggest to you that the whole idea of a cult mentality, that we are in a pandemic of that now. Mm-hmm. We are in a pandemic of not being able to process factual, scientific, proven data and information. And who's going to save us from this? We can't look to the church. We cannot look to the church. The church is no longer a purveyor of that truth anymore.
Preach.
To look at objective reality anymore. As a matter of fact, it has messed around so long, it's broken. It's broken, and we're paying for it now. This is our religion in this country. It's an epistemological crisis. And that's
the division that it causes, right? If you believe one thing, then you're ostracized. If you believe another, you're ostracized. Absolutely. There's no communication. I mean, I get messages, private messages constantly saying how patient I am. Why do I deal with these people on social media? Because I am against division. Because I am against ignorance. And until you prove that you're stupid, until you prove that you refuse to learn in any way, shape, or form, you refuse, Brady, you're not stupid. But I mean, we've all been stupid, right? It's not that's not, but the goal is to get beyond that.
Yeah.
And when and until someone says, no, I refuse to learn, or that is proven that way, I'm going to give them the energy to do that, because I think that's the only thing that's going to solve this.
Yes.
That's a
Is
great
patience,
point.
is the energy. I mean, I just posted last week, a fuck off a day keeps trolls away. It was actually the therapist away at first, but I changed it to the idiots. But yeah, I mean, it's, sometimes you got to be like, I can't anymore. But if we all segregate to our own sides of beliefs, it is only going to get worse.
All right. Exactly.
And then we'll become a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, what do you got to say?
Sorry, I forgot to plug in my computer and disappeared there for a minute.
That's what happened. Okay.
Yeah. No, what did I miss? What are we talking about?
We were talking about you, Steve. No,
Yeah.
we're kidding.
Oh.
Well, and I think that Tim touched on the cognitive dissonance that occurs, right? It's I've been there. It's painful, and some people just crawl away and say, "No, I can't do it." I think it takes a really a lot of strength to say, "This is crap. I need to look further." Steve, do you think that
Well, one of the things,
if it hadn't have been for the abuse, do you think that you still would have been involved?
Good question.
that's a really good question. Uh, no, there were other things. There were other things, and really, for me, it's kind of exactly what Brady was talking about earlier. When you get a glimpse of kind of the bigger picture, and so for my 5 years in Kazakhstan, even though I went there as a missionary, and my goal was straight up to convert Muslims to Christianity. Even though I was there with that express goal for 5 years, it was the beginning of my process of deconstruction, because here I am, looking at this other culture, and this other culture with Muslim roots, with indigenous roots, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And at the same time, right here I am dealing with um, this narcissistic guy who I finally figured out what he was up to, and that's when he really came after me and my family. So here I am looking at this beautiful culture, on the one hand, that's different than mine, and my Christian brother, who's like just abusing people left and right, and oh man, the disillusionment was really setting in. So it was definitely part of it. It was, it was one half of the equation, but I was getting a lot on the other side of the equation that, hey, the rest of the world, they're doing great. They're good. I mean, they have their stuff just like every group does. But no, they were wonderful. I just had nothing but incredibly positive experiences, across, myself and my whole family. Everyone treated us wonderfully, and so that was a huge start for me to start to realize that something isn't right about this picture. Like what am I doing here?
Okay, wait a
Yeah,
minute. I'm
that was a
confused.
big
If they
part of it.
treated you wonderfully, then how did you come? You lost me on that. What do you mean they treated you wonderfully?
Well, so what I'm saying is that, as Brady was saying earlier, when you see the other religions like Islam or Buddhism or whatever, and you realize, that really they're all kind of doing all the same things, and you start to see all these commonalities. So that's what I was seeing,
Oh, okay.
in that picture, that this group, which with indigenous and Islamic roots, really were, no different. They were no different. There were good people and there were bad people. So anyway,
Yes.
you asked me, if I wouldn't have left, if I hadn't been abused. But no, I think I would have, even without that, because this was a huge start for me to see, that it was cultish, by seeing the people that I was there, to supposedly control and convert, and we did control them, and bring into our ways. So that was a huge part of it for me.
Well, and that's that separation and the demonization and the other, right? You went to go conquer the Muslims over there and bring them to Christ because you're a warrior. And I mean, whenever you ignite those types of feelings, and again, it's, I'm here to save and I'm here to do all these things, it gets the ego going, it gets everything, and it just starts filling it up. It's human nature. It really is, because, the amphibian brain has been warning us forever, stay away from them. So when something feeds it, as well as, attaches to our trauma and our ego, you have all of the fronts coming in and you get caught up. I mean, I don't think that anybody would say, you know what, I'm in a cult and I'm going to stay here. It just doesn't work that way. Or you disagree, Brady? I mean, they would say, I'm in a religion, I'm in a faith, but I mean, no one's going to be a cult.
Well, I'm thinking about one of the documentaries that I really latched onto. Okay. It followed up with some of the members of and a lot of them ended up back in different cults. So I think some of them stayed in the same one. Those, I think, wouldn't make sense to me as, and in the same way that you're describing. Ones that just ended up in another cult, to me, that was like, you learned how to fish, you learned how to get one fish, but you didn't learn how to fish. You learned how to recognize one cult, but you didn't learn how to recognize cults. And so to me, that's where the difference is if you can critically examine your community, and if it's based on your relationship to a certain belief system, or a relationship to these set of narrative, supernatural narratives, you need to be able to recognize that. Because I think a lot of I complain a lot. That's a right word. Let's be honest, Brady. I complain a lot about how a lot of progressive Christianity ends up working out in practice, and it's not their intention. But a lot of progressive Christianity says that they're about these humanist values that they've taken away from secular culture. And then they say, well, Jesus owns all of these. And so then they'll say our relationship is about these values. But then in practice, it's actually about, are your relationship to these values the Christian relationship to these values? And it actually becomes about those supernatural beliefs while advertising itself as being about values. And so I think it's really important for us to make a difference between what we can see and observe ourselves versus what we're told we should be seeing and observing. And I think that difference is and really,
I actually had a job interview with a cult a couple months ago. And
girl, what happened?
I didn't know. I mean, I looked it up online and I'm like, okay, this can't be the job. This can't be the job, right?
What?
And so they're interviewing me and he shows me the website and I'm like, oh my God, this is the job. Oh my God, this is the job. It was about a 45-minute to an hour interview. And he told me things that in any other situation, it was Skype, I would have hung up, ran away, did anything. But by the end of the interview, I was like, maybe I could do this. He had convinced me that people dying wanted to give them their homes, that I should go after all of these people and say you should dedicate because it's good karma points. And I was, after an hour, I was desensitized. Totally desensitized. He was so nice. He was so caring. He spoke of love. As soon as the interview ends, I call my girlfriend and I'm like, what the hell?
What just happened?
And the more distant I got away from that interview, the more tragic it appeared.
More
the
clarity.
More fucked up it appeared.
Yes.
Had I not had that break, had I had the constant indoctrination and the constant filling and all of these things, I would have fallen in. And I'm like, killed, I can find a good way to do good here. My ego would come in and say, I'm going to save them, whatever.
Yes. Yes.
But when you get away, which is what they don't want you to do, that's why they have you bring into your friendships and everything. So you are constantly in that bubble. So you can't get away and think. You can't say, wait, let me ponder this. Let me figure it out. It's more reactionary. And you want to believe. Tim?
I had a.
Oh, sorry.
I always said my best sanctuary is inside my head. That's where I do my best. Yeah, I do my best thinking. And, in the introduction, talking about retiring from the Presbyterian Ministry in 2000, what I found was rather interesting and somewhat dismaying, because I had been in the ministry for over 20 years. And I saw myself as progressive, inclusive, and bringing in people that were definitely different. And I'm going to give you an example. But what ultimately led to my resignation was that I've been pastoring this church for X amount of years, and if this is what it's resulted in, that I'm making no real impact. Well, at the time of the war in Bosnia, especially with the refugees that were fleeing for their lives, that there was thousands who were being killed, and many were brought into the Des Moines area where I live, and I become very, very close friends with a number of families. And one of the things I learned about Bosnians is that if you're befriended by one husband and wife, then it explodes exponentially into the Bosnian community. And that's what happened to me. And these people had been attacked by the Croatians, who were Roman Catholic, to their west, and then the Serbians to the northeast that were Russian Orthodox. So anybody that was Christian was automatically suspect, but they saw me as different. And a number of them started actually attending our church, and I never expected them to convert. But the way they were treated by my parishioners broke my heart.
Oh, wow.
Broke my heart. And so you talk about cultic behavior. They had already adopted certain cultic behavior, regardless what it is, whether it's even patriotism. All right. And superimpose that, because this was before 9/11 now. All right. But they were Muslim. And we don't like Muslims. They didn't come out and say that. But I noticed that when we would have our carry-in dinner once a month, they brought their food, which was wonderful. The people wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't interact with them. So that eventually led to my resignation, not just from that congregation, but from the ministry altogether. Now, there's some other complications involved there, but nonetheless, that was somewhat the straw that broke the camel's back right there, because I thought, what good have I done? That I have not modeled this for them in word or deed, and this is what it's resulted in. And I'm still friends, by the way, with a number of these people who have moved back to Bosnia, wondering when I'm going to come visit.
Well, we are at the top of the hour.
Yes.
And I know this conversation is going to go strong in our VIP. So let's go through and have some final comments. Tim, you go first.
Thank you very much. It goes back to two things, I think, and that is critical thinking. And very simply, what I say is Sunday School 101. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if any ideology does not have that as their core belief and does not carry with it as its definitive and descriptive persona, run for your life.
Thank you, Tim. Steve?
Yeah, I love the direction we kind of went in towards the end and identifying, the cultish behavior on a national or maybe ethnic perspective. That's really great, because it's the same sort of idea. So along those lines, most of you know I wrote a book called Why Do They Hate Us? Making Peace with the Muslim World, and very relevant for this moment. I wrote about 20 pages in a chapter about the situation in Afghanistan, how it started, and how it got to where it is. So I want to offer that free. I'll cut and paste those pages out to anyone who wants them. Just email me, and my email is steve@salamusa.org. You can see it right there. So just email me, and I'll be happy to email you back those pages.
Fantastic. That's a very cool gift. Thank you so much. Okay, Brady, what do you got to say?
How much time do I have? 30 seconds?
A minute.
Okay.
Do what you need to do.
What I was going to say earlier, I had a job interview at a marketing place, and I had to go into an interview, like into this room with a bookshelf, and fill out like the application first. And I saw all the books were Scientology books, and I was like, "What?" So I started looking at my phone and realized that like Glassdoor is a good place to look, because Glassdoor, if you're interviewing for places, it'll tell you like how that work environment is. And like a whole bunch of ex-employees were like, "No, this is just a whole bunch of Scientologists who are trying to like get you, and you have to like required to go to these seminars, all of that." So
You can get
Glassdoor,
into
my
the story
friends.
deeper in the VIP.
Oh! Look for patterns. Understand the power of suggestion. Anyway, my other thing is that the Life After podcast is coming back. Chuck has told me that the first edit should be done tomorrow. So by the end of the week, our episode should be back, and I'm planning to be like back on a regular basis for the first time since like 2019.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really happy about that, and feel like I could get some stuff out of my heart that needs to get out of my heart in good ways. But thank you all so much. I really enjoyed being on this panel, and it was really good seeing you all.
Likewise.
You guys were great. I want to say hi to Heather. She said hello to Tim and I. And I want to also thank Chrissy. David, it's in the VIP. Go over to the VIP and the link will be popping up.
David has constantly been asking about links. And I'm just like, David, stop.
Take care of him.
They're in the VIP area. Everybody, Tim knows that. And Steve knows that. Sherry knows that. Everybody knows that. Come on.
He'll get to right when we're in the VIP.
Wrong way, because we moved. Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. It was a fabulous show. I will see you guys backstage. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh my God. I love these shows, right? We can always count on a good show. We can always count on David being here, and Tim and Kirsten and Chrissy. Thanks for joining us. Next week, we are talking about Native American religions and shamanism, which should be another very cool show. If you are a member, go to the VIP and we will go ahead and talk about that. And I just want to make sure that you guys all know that I love you, and that I am so glad that we get to spend each week. Thanks so much. Walk in love. Bye.